Okay, we are live.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It is March 8th, 2022. We are here tonight with Jobs Committee, and thank you all for joining us. I think we are doing some work with the Executive Director tonight. Is that correct?
He had sent along some notes and guidance for the topic of this meeting. Do you want me to run through it? I don't know if you saw his.
I did. So it looks like, so I guess I'll read it, guys. So it says tonight's meeting, he suggests we'll focus on the discussion and consideration of a legislative fix to a problem that they're facing in the hiring process. In short, our new acting associate general counsel, Shanoa May, has concluded that the city charter is preventing us from hiring very qualified people. Here's a summary of a memo she's written on the subject. The current language in section 18-6 and 7 of the city charter, a conflict of interest provision related to law enforcement affiliations and PAB staff and hiring and supervision should be removed. The sweeping language of the current section has a punitive effect on otherwise worthy candidates and employees without showing an impairment of judgment in the performance of official duties. The language also may conflict with the collaborative agenda of the Police Accountability Board, which values the input and cooperation of law enforcement. So there is a memo, and I think that can go up for the board, for the committee members, please.
Sure. Just 1 second while I get my screen shared. Sorry about that. Sorry. Just trying to get this out of my way. Okay, there we go.
So in all, this is a message to City Council to ask them to remove that specific section.
Yes.
Okay.
It's disqualifying some otherwise perfectly qualified candidates right now.
Yeah, I figured that we would come to this, especially when we had the 3 previous candidates that we spoke about with relatives that have relatives of police departments around. Question. So the city council, is city council the only, well, let me rephrase that. What is the process to get that section removed? Do we only need city council's approval, or how does it work?
My understanding of it is that we would propose this as legislation in their next general meeting. So there's also the proposed local law attached here. So that would be, I'm assuming, what Connor's looking to present, and then council would just have to vote to approve it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Any additional thoughts on this? I mean, I know that I think the thing is that we have to consider is just the public response. And that I think that, a lot of folks will be concerned about this, but I think that you're right. I mean, we really are losing out on candidates that could be really a great asset to the PAB. And I think that it should be explored and considered.
Consider the public's response to what?
Consider the public's response to removing that clause.
You personally, do you have any thoughts on how you think the public will respond?
Well, I know that when the Alliance actually championed this, that was something that they were concerned about. And that's what they championed for. They championed to make sure that relatives could not serve.
And to what end? Like,
Work
what was
for-
the?
Well, I mean, but I think that's the thing, and I'm waiting for the executive director to get here. We had an emergency that we'll brief the board on in a few minutes, but in an email. But I think that the charter wasn't clear, and that's the reason for this memo. Is it that did it mean that the actual board itself that police family members of police could not serve on the board, or that they could not work for the agency? So there was a discrepancy in who said what and what interpretation meant, and that was the reason for this memo. And then also a reason for
Yeah.
the memo being that will this are we missing out on great candidates because of this?
Okay, as I read the memo, I understand that we are missing. I personally believe we are missing out on great candidates. I was a part of the committee to where we reviewed, candidates who we feel may have been a conflict of interest. My question more so is, what was the reason that the Alliance put that section in there? What was the reason of that? I know we're stating that they didn't want, officers, relatives to serve on the PAB, but what was the reason? What were they afraid of? That's kind of like it wouldn't change my perspective in any way, but I still want to know, like, what were they kind of afraid of?
I don't know. I mean, Danielle, you don't, I know that you served on the Alliance. Were you in those discussions? Yes or no?
May have been, but to be quite honest, I don't remember specifically. So I don't remember specifically talking about the relatives of police officers. I don't know I don't know why they would have put that in there, but that would be, I don't know. I'm interested to find out why.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm almost getting my screen on. I'm really sorry. My sense is that in order to have this be truly civilian-led, and to be truly able to represent the people, and given the high degree of understandable camaraderie between people in the department, even to family members, they wanted to make sure there was no conflict of interest. Right? It's nice if you're hearing cases about people you don't know, but what if you're hearing your husband's or your cousin's best friend's case, and then there's some sort of ability for them to have conversations over dinner that would influence their opinions or whatever. So I think in the same way that like in being clergy, if you serve at a church, after you leave that church, you're not supposed to be a part of that church for a number of years, right? Because you don't want to influence what comes after you. That was my understanding from just the little bit I heard. It would probably be good to get someone from the Alliance though to kind of talk about it as well if we really wanted it from them directly. But in the same way, you don't want a priest serving on a board that's trying to bring up priests on certain charges, right? Because there's always that defense of your brother kind of a thing, or your sister, or your kindred. So I see why the Alliance would be concerned about that for sure. And I also wonder how what kind of clear criteria we could set if there was someone what constitutes a conflict of interest. Is it just that you're related to an RPD officer? Is there a way to establish kind of distance? Because I also think it's crucial to have people with experience in policing, right? That's the number one critique we often hear, is how can people who have no idea what it's like in the midst of things to really understand what's going on? And that argument can be heard by different groups in different ways, but I think having folks with firsthand knowledge of things could be helpful given the right candidates. So I'd be open to exploring both the original intent and also maybe seeing if they'd be willing to establish some criteria wherein if we found a candidate that was rock solid in terms of qualifications, that we would be able to maybe, I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but maybe even bring them to the Alliance or some folks, or have like a subcommittee of citizens who would be willing to ask some questions. Again, just some way to kind of make sure that concern is respected while also being able to kind of make a case for them. So there's kind of meeting a halfway there. But again, I don't know what legal is said about that or what would be involved with that. I can turn my camera on then.
I can hop in to say that I just heard from Connor. He will be hopping on momentarily to provide some answers to these questions as well.
Rev, any thoughts?
Did we have anything?
No, I think like Matthew thinks, if we're talking about the conflict of interest, I agree with what Matthew says. It just sort of makes sense in the sense of following what I would call a tradition or a culture that's maybe unwritten, but it really is. Yeah, so I get that. Yeah.
Welcome.
For whatever reason, I get it.
Okay. All right. All right. Executive director is here.
Yes.
And as a way to Connor, just the last thought, and maybe Connor can answer this. If there was also a clause in hiring such folks that, if there was a case that they were investigating that involved a relative, that they would have to recuse themselves, right? That could be another way to deal with that. But again, let's hear from Connor. He probably knows all the details much better.
So I'm happy to field any questions. Again, my apologies, board members. It's been quite the day here. So thank you very much for waiting for me. Board member Nikoloff, with regards to your question, the charter already includes a provision that prevents people from working on cases like that. So there's already a very strong conflict of interest statement, but the remedy in that section is to prevent people from doing that specific kind of work that they would be conflicted out for.
Right. Well, I'm guessing that as the hiring director, you're aware of whether the person's job would put them into too many recusal situations, which would make them not an ideal candidate in the first place, right?
Exactly. So the reality is that there are going to be some people for whom their ties to law enforcement are disqualifying, right?
Right.
So you can imagine, say, like a former chief of police of the RPD. They would know too many people, et cetera. It would be impossible for them to do that work. But there are other people who might have other relationships, like a brother or a parent or someone who, works in RPD in a very specific way, and that, you can address those potential conflicts in ways that allows them to do the work while also bringing in some perspectives into PAB.
I can jump in. Reverend, you said one of your questions was what was the Alliance's original intent with this, just to be sure that we don't step on their toes in here.
Great question. One of the, Reverend Harvey, one of the interesting things was that there are a bunch of different conflicts rules. So there are conflicts rules in the legislation around board members. There are conflicts rules around the executive director. And then there are conflicts rules around the staff. And the rules are a little bit different for everyone. And it's not clear that it might have been a drafting error. It might have been, for example, I just want to bring this up. So the executive director, for me, I'm not allowed to be currently or formally employed by RPD or any other local, state, or federal law enforcement agency, or be immediate family member of any incumbent employee of RPD. And then there's this, all such persons and their immediate family shall be free of any conflict of interest, including but not limited to current employment with RPD. All that's to say is that there's more stringent restrictions in the law around staff than there are around the executive director. And that just kind of suggests, that I could have more close law enforcement ties, but my staff couldn't. Seems like there was just a drafting error there rather than necessarily intent to block all those people. Honestly, I've had conversations with, people who were involved in the drafting, and I got different perspectives on that. What I have heard, though, from people who were involved in drafting the legislation, when I bring up some of the specific candidates who we've been thinking of hiring, they've said, that's the exact kind of person we'd want it at PAB,
What makes again, I know we're talking in non-specifics to protect confidentiality, but like, what would make a candidate in your eyes as the executive director so qualified and so worth pursuing as an employee that we're willing to kind of have this conversation about legislation?
Yeah, I think that it would be some of the candidates that we've already spoken to, candidates who have used their perspectives on policing, whether it's, having a half brother who's an officer, or, a relative who, works for the FBI, having them understand that the problems in policing are about the systems at the end of the day. And those systems, can affect the way that people do their work, and seeing that there can be good people who work in law enforcement who want to see things change, and that they've seen the problems in law enforcement, saying, hey, someone's worked with my brother, or someone's worked with, my parent, and I saw them break the rules and not be held accountable. And that's the kind of behavior I want to see stop, so that people like my relatives can do their work, without that kind of having their work tarnished in that way. And what I will say, to be clear about all this still, if the tweak in the legislation happened, it would still mean that, this committee would still serve as a hearing board to make sure that, we aren't hiring people who don't have those conflicts, right? All this tweak would say is that we can make case-by-case determinations about this, rather than being barred just because someone happened to have a relative. And I think this is really important too. Under the current law, if my sister suddenly starts working for a law enforcement agency, I have to step down from PAB. And that seems very, very problematic, given that we have 55 people working at PAB. The odds of just losing people randomly because of, family members' decisions seems troubling. So instead of addressing those potential conflicts by, firewalling people and addressing it on an individual basis, just having to fire people seems like a very difficult place to put our staff in.
As a follow-up, would there be any concerns from RPD's side, right? Because we're trying to be unbiased all around. Is there a reason RPD wouldn't want that, right? That we have someone connected to law enforcement, and just to ask from all sides.
I don't know. I know that I have personally heard from Mike Mazzeo time and again that he wants people with law enforcement experience at PAB.
Right.
So, I can't predict any other, we don't like this particular officer or something, or, I don't think we can predict that, but all I've heard is, the need for more law enforcement experience at PAB. And, this is one way of potentially having some of that experience without jeopardizing the integrity of our investigations. Like I said, I don't think that this is going to lead us to hiring, RPD officers.
Right.
It would be very hard to justify anyone not having a conflict of interest in that case. But certainly the real issue is here, relatives for whom people have no control over, those relationships preventing someone else from working at PAB. We have to assess those relationships on a case-by-case basis.
So may I ask, since this is my first meeting, the purpose of our meeting tonight?
The purpose of this meeting tonight was solely to address this issue.
Okay.
Solely to address this issue of whether or not the committee should recommend to the board that this legislation go to council.
Right, and we talked about, Rev, I think you weren't here, but we talked about the memo that was submitted by General Counsel Shanoa May of our organization about changing it.
Okay. So
yeah, I think where
are we?
In agreement. No, I think we're in agreement that we can take a vote on it. I think we're all in general agreement. So I guess I will propose a vote that, the vote will be that I think we should go ahead and send a email and have it be as an agenda item to recommend to the board in our general meeting to take a look at this clause within the charter and recommend that it be examined and changed.
Before we do that, can I just ask one last question?
Yeah.
do we want, again, Connor, maybe I missed you saying this, and apologies if so, because you said you talked to folks. I just want to make sure, I know, because some of us are Alliance reps here and some of us are city council reps, our board members. I just really want to make sure that PABA also, or the Alliance, really feels heard on this, because if there's like some reason we're missing, that would make them feel like this was, again, that, and not just the Alliance, but the people that the Alliance is speaking on behalf of, right? And that we're also accountable to. I don't know if that would be something we talk about as a huge board, as the full board, but it just seems important that, you know, that was, so yeah, maybe you can, maybe I missed that, Connor, that you said, but you hear what I'm saying? Like, I think just deciding without having their input, I would, or conversation.
So Shani, are you saying we take this to the board?
Yeah, so I would say we could take it to the board, but then I can add on to that vote, Reverend Nikoloff, that, you know, we can also send a letter to the Alliance stating that this is something that we wish to change, or, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, folks, we are the Police Accountability Board. I mean, we have the duty to look and examine to make sure that we are, you know, doing the best that we can for the city. And that also means that this is kind of in our purview. So I guess I would just open up that and just ask if, you know, what makes sense to make sure that the Alliance feels included, should they not be? And so I'll just table the motion for right now and just ask just a question like that. Anybody? Anyone?
What I will say is that I remember when we first brought this to the Alliance's attention 3 months ago. And I remember getting, you know, having a lot of people ask questions like, having, some resistance to the idea of, we shouldn't be hiring people who are, direct relatives of police officers, because, they would just leak information, to some people asking more questions, to saying it would be a case-by-case basis thing. So I think there's definitely a range of views on this, and I don't want to deny that there are some people who might be opposed to this. I don't think there's any doubt about it. What I think makes the most difference in people's decision-making is understanding that there are concrete candidates and seeing their qualifications and seeing who they are. Because I think in the abstract, you can imagine someone who really would not be qualified to work at PAB because of their relationship. And I think that what needs to be reassured is that the board and the staff have a process for vetting those conflicts and making sure that no one who has a significant conflict of interest can actually come in that would truly prevent them from doing the work would be able to be hired here.
Absolutely. And I have complete confidence in the process we've set up. Like, I would be comfortable voting on it myself. I just, like I said, I want to respect that if there's voices we need to hear in that could either help us refine the process or would feel assured, so that by seeing it or having a voice in that, I would just want to make space for that. But maybe we could at least, in our sending it to the board, bring this up with the broader board, since, again, I think, Shawnee, are you the only Alliance rep here tonight? Well, you and Danielle, right? So two of them.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's more. I sometimes forget which of us is which in terms of our rep, where we come from in that sense. So yeah. I'm in support of it. I just really want to make sure that we're doing our due process with them as well.
We could ask, in theory, I suppose you could ask Alliance members to, if we wanted to have like a speak to board session at the next board meeting. I don't know. I mean, you could alternatively ask people just to email their thoughts.
Yeah, maybe like offering, like sending it to the relevant folks to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. If you'd like to offer feedback, or you have a strong sense that even with all this process in place, drop us an email. And if it seems like the emails are enough that it warrants a speak to the board, we could do that. But at least it gives people a chance. And helps us to remain transparent to them. I don't know what do other people think, though.
So I know they have a meeting tomorrow. I would suggest we send that tonight, and then we can just follow up with them tomorrow and say, hey, this needs to be addressed at your meeting, if you want. I don't know, but I would say that should come from the leadership itself within the Alliance, or whatever that looks like, for them to talk amongst each other, and then just to send us their thoughts by email, or we can, if they want to speak to us, like a speak to council type of, or speak to board type of situation, and we can arrange that for the next meeting. We have about a week.
Yeah, I'd like to see what comes up as a result, and if we need to, great. And if we don't, then cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, was that, so I am gonna go ahead then, and so the motion is, even though it's tabled, it's still there. So I guess the question is, do you still want to go ahead and vote to move this to the general meeting so that we can discuss in board meeting?
Second. Yep,
Okay,
so,
all right, so all in favor of approval of the motion as it is?
aye.
Okay, 1, 2,
Aye.
3, 4.
Aye.
There, okay,
All right, motion carries.
Well,
all right,
we can-
thank you. Okay, so was there anything else we needed to address tonight? I only see that.
I wanted to bring up just one agenda item for the next meeting of the committee, but I would like to do it because it's going to involve the specific name of a candidate. I would like to request that the board move into executive session to discuss this pursuant to open meetings law, which allows for the board to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to the promotion hiring of a specific person. And in this session, we discuss that specific person who we might be hiring.
So then after we go into executive session, we will be adjourning after this meeting. And so we're going to go ahead and see everyone later.
You just got to vote to adjourn and go to
I move
executive.
that we move to executive session.
All right, well, we have to move to executive session and adjourning at the same
You
time?
adjourn afterwards.
That's what I thought. Okay, all
I
right.
move to executive session and to adjourn at the conclusion of said session.
Second that. All right, all in favor of moving to executive session with the adjournment after?
In favor.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay,
Have a-
unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you.